by comments from the Minister for Industrial Relations today, claiming that Labor was gearing up to oppose the legislation. He knows that's not true. Why scare the hell out of people in the middle of a pandemic? They know that is not true. They know that this needs to be made law. What Labor is continuing to do is to point out where what they have put forward can be improved, where they've drawn lines that don't make a whole lot of sense and there's a better way to do it. Of course we are making that case. That is our job as members of Parliament. And I simply say to the government, there will, at the end of this week, be a wage subsidy, and it will be there because of cooperation. Don't go looking for a fight as a distraction from what is the big story today, that right now 1 million Australians who were given hope yesterday have been told there'll be nothing for them in the wage subsidy this morning. There is time for the government to fix this, and they should. There's a few issues around today, so I'm happy to take any questions. We've got a number of you on the phone, I'm told.
Yeah, so it's Sarah Ison from the West Australian. Just on this issue, something I wanted to clarify was when presented with these concerns this morning, Christian Porter was to point out that, you know, these casuals could apply for the JobKeeper program and talking about parity there and so on. What's your response to that downplaying of these concerns because of that other payment that's out there?
Well, what he's saying is to the person who misses out who's supporting a household, your child gets a wage subsidy and you can go to Centrelink. Now, I don't think anyone will be able to make sense of the fact that the person who's doing the job for pocket money gets a full wage subsidy to $1,500 a fortnight, and the person who's trying to support a household gets told Centrelink's their only option. It just doesn't add up. So yeah, that's the response.
Why is Centrelink going to Centrelink such a problem besides the wage subsidy? I mean, you're getting a support payment either way. What's the major concern here?
Oh, there are two things that change. One is the amount is a different rate, but the bigger concern, and it's hard to think what will be a bigger concern than the rate, but I'll tell you there is one, and it's this: you lose the connection to the employer. The reason Labor argued for a wage subsidy is because we want people to keep their connection to the employer during the crisis, not only because it's better for them now, but it also means on the other side, then the Australian economy will be able to kick back into gear more quickly, and those people who've been on a wage subsidy, the relationships there with the employer, they can get straight back to work. In previous downturns, many people, when they've lost the relationship with the employer, many people never return to work again. We don't want that to happen. And that's why we've welcomed the government establishing a wage subsidy. But for people who are truly relying on it, it should be there.
Hello,
yeah, thank you.
It's Amber Austin-White from Network 10. The government was saying if this is done by the Fair Work Commission, that the process could take weeks, if not months. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's correct?
The Commission's showing at the moment that they can move at lightning speed. And, you know, for a whole lot of most awards, this is a really simple, fast change. The only reason we've been arguing the Commission needs to have a role is because every award and employment arrangement is different, and as a result of that, there is a high chance that a legislative change will have unintended consequences. So that's what I've argued the whole way through this. It's the government that's been wanting to set up this all or nothing fight. I saw this bizarre comment that Christian Porter made today in his media conference, where he ridiculed Labor for not accepting what was in the draft of the amendment. Well, we haven't been provided the draft of the amendment. The draft legislation we were given, we've got all the information as to what would happen with Treasury, and the section for the Fair Work Act has a heading and then a blank page. Now, it's fine if they're still working on it. The reason they're still working on it is because it is really complicated. So we've simply put forward the Commission because it's able to tailor everything to the different sorts of workplaces. But for Christian Porter to then extend it and claim that, you know, Labor wants to delay or Labor wants to oppose, he's trying to manufacture some high-stakes fight which simply isn't there. And I just think it's irresponsible to be scaring people at a time when, for the vast majority of workers, the wage subsidy will be there, and the group that's in play at the moment, principally, are more than 1 million casuals, and he's pushing this issue as a distraction from that.
Jen from 7 here. Is there any circumstance, any at all, that will force Labor to vote against it on Wednesday?
Oh, nothing that I can imagine. Absolutely nothing that I can imagine. Let's not forget the order of this. We called for a wage subsidy. They said they didn't want one. We kept demanding it. Eventually they said, OK, there'll be a wage subsidy, and we have welcomed that. The discussion since then is simply how can we make it as effective as possible. And you know, we're not going. No,
we'll vote for it.
No, of course, we're not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But we're not going to also, in the public argument and the debate between now and when this goes through, stop advocating for 1 million people who the government wants to leave behind. We want them included as well. We're arguing for that. We're advocating for that. Yesterday, the government gave them some hope. This morning, the government, for reasons I don't understand, has done an about-face. They really should be looking at this situation for casuals who are relying on this income.
Katina from AAP here. Just wondering if there's anything in what you've seen in the legislation that would stop a person who was working in 2 jobs who met the criteria for both employers from receiving the payment from both employers. And just secondly, if I could just, regarding Parliament, wondering what you made of Christian Porter's comments this morning that the government's got better things to do than sitting in Parliament, and where Labor is up to on a deal for a joint committee of oversight of all of this.
Okay. So sorry, the first, I'll deal with the reverse, and then you might have to remind me of so I've got the first issue. I remember. Yep, I'll do that now. The first issue that you raised was the one with respect to stopping effectively a double dipping of one employee being able to access the payment twice. It was covered off in the original fact sheets that the government put out that wouldn't be permitted. I haven't found that specific clause of the legislation yet. It came to us late last night, but I'm confident that the government will have guarded against that. So I expect that'll be fine. With absolutely no reason to think, because they did cover off on the original fact sheet. With respect to the second issue, can you give me that again? Sorry.
Just regarding Christian Porter.
Oh, Christian Porter, and then the committee. Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as the committee is concerned, negotiations, as I understand it, are going very well for a Senate Select Committee. That is, effectively, they have been in our Parliament the most powerful committees that we've had. They've historically been more powerful than joint committees in terms of being able to hold governments to account. The negotiations on that are being led by Katie Gallagher and Penny Wong, but my understanding is we should be working on the basis that there is a high likelihood we'll get a Senate Select Committee out of that, which is important. It doesn't of itself, though, override the importance of Parliament meeting. And, for Christian Porter saying he's got more important things to do, I don't know where to begin when someone accepts that their job is Leader of the House, that their job is to be the principal parliamentarian for the nation, to then ridicule the importance of their own job. That's what Christian Porter did today. He ridiculed the importance of his own job. Have a look at what question time was like when the Parliament last met. 2 things happened. In terms of our questions, I don't think anyone can argue that they were targeted. The questions that we asked, and indeed even the Dixes that came from the government, they weren't tell us how good you are, or they weren't sledges from us. They were questions of detail that the Australian people wanted answers for. And in fairness to the government ministers, I'll say the answers they gave were unusually good. They weren't sledging Labor. In fact, they managed to not once in an entire question time tell us how much they hate us. It was what question time should be. At the moment, you've got Parliament behaving at its best. And the government's response is they'd rather not have Parliament. We showed last time we can meet and observe a whole lot of social distancing and public health demands that are really important for people who then return to all the corners of the country. Members of Parliament, some of them had to isolate when they returned and had no hesitation in putting themselves forward again, saying that they'd still come back this time. People want to do their jobs, and as members of Parliament, our first job is to be a member of the Parliament. We need the Parliament to be meeting, to be updating legislation. There'll be things that they get wrong this Wednesday. And, you know, when you try to roll out $130 billion this quickly, of course there'll be things they'll get wrong.